If you've watched much of this channel, you know that I'm big into sausage making. And recently, I had an idea for a new type of bratwurst-style sausage that I was really excited to try out. And as I'm sure you can tell by the video description, the sausage I'm talking about is a chili flavored sausage. That's right, I'm taking ground meat, combining it with all the types of seasonings and flavors that I would ordinarily put in a great big batch of chili, and turning it all into sausage links. Now, I've, quote, invented a couple different new types of sausage over the years, but ordinarily, if I make a video about it, I've already completely fleshed out the recipe, tried it, improved it, made it a bunch of times before I ever bring it to camera. But I just came up with this chili sausage idea a couple days ago, and as I was getting all the things together to start making it, I figured, what the heck, I'm gonna shoot the whole thing and turn it into a sort of food experiment video. If it turns out great, then great. And if it turns out horribly, well, that might be entertaining too. Anyway, as I mentioned, the recipe that I'm using for these sausages is based heavily and maybe almost entirely on my ordinary chili recipe. Most of the seasonings are the same. There's some modifications and amendments that had to be made for the sausage format. So of course it can't be the identical chili recipe shoved into sausage casings, but it's pretty darn close, and my aim is to really capture the overall flavor profile and essence of my chili recipe. First, let's take a look at the meat we'll be using. Because this is meant to reflect a chili recipe, I'll of course start with some beef. I'm using an 80-20 ground beef for this, but because I think the best sausages are made with pork, I'm going to incorporate in some of that as well. And because this is an experimental recipe, I'm not going to bother grinding up all my meat from scratch. I'll just use some quality beef and pork that was already ground up by the butcher. For this batch, 1 pound of 80-20 ground beef and 1 pound of ground pork. Now to start throwing in all our seasonings: kosher salt, chili powder, cayenne pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, dehydrated onions, cumin, dry parsley, black pepper, and white sugar. And I am going to use a binder in the form of whole milk powder. I'll give that all a quick preliminary mix. And don't worry, I'll put the full exact recipe for this in the video description below that includes all quantities and measurements of everything. Next, I'll add my liquid. Usually for sausages, I'd use water or sometimes beer, but the main liquid in my chili recipe is tomato juice, so that's what I'm using for my liquid in these sausages. I'll pour it in and get that liquid somewhat incorporated into my meat mixture. And now for the final ingredients. First, some yellow onion. I'm using about 1/2 of a yellow onion, peeled and grated. Mincing would work fine too, but grating really breaks it all down in a way that works nicely in a sausage mixture. I'll throw that grated onion into the mixture, followed by 5 or 6 cloves of garlic, and finally one of these little cans of diced green chilies. Now I'll very thoroughly mix everything together with my hands until it's a pretty tacky pile of meat. And while I'm doing this, I'll mention that you can use whatever chilies you like. I could have added some minced or grated jalapenos or a spicier version of those canned green chilies, but I'm an extreme lightweight when it comes to spicy foods, and I don't want to bury the flavor in spiciness, particularly with an experimental recipe like this. Anyway, once everything is very well mixed, it's time to give it a quick test. I'll just take a small amount of the sausage mixture and make a little patty out of it, fry it up in a pan, and give it a taste. That sample was, by all accounts, delicious, so I'm moving forward with this recipe. I'll fill up my Lem 5-pound sausage stuffing machine with all that meat, load up the filler tube with my natural hog casings, and now we're just cranking out some sausage. Twist them up into some nice sized links, somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 to 6.5 inches, I guess. Then I'll coil them all back up, give each link a couple pricks with my sausage pricker, and now I'll put this whole thing into the fridge, uncovered, for a few hours. This will help those casings to dry out a little bit, and also make it a little easier to cut the links apart without risking any meat spill out. A few hours later, I'll separate the links with a sharp knife, and now there's nothing left to do but grill a couple of these beauties up and give it a proper taste test. And that is some pretty looking sausage right there. That slight red color from the tomato juice, insanely juicy. You got those bits of chili pepper and onion in there. Time to taste it. Incredible. And while I would be absolutely happy to stand here and eat slices of that sausage, I think a proper presentation is in order. Because this is a sausage inspired by a nice bowl of chili, it seems only fitting to prepare it with some familiar chili garnishes. First, I'll load up a brat bun with some sharp cheddar cheese. And you know what? Let's give it a quick blast with the torch just to make it a little melty. Then the sausage is going down. And lastly, we'll hit it with some sour cream and finish with some chopped green onion. We've all had a chili dog, but I give you what may very well be the world's first true chili sausage. I can't even tell you how good that turned out and how happy I am with it. I'm not sure I'd change anything about it at all, with the possible exception of the salt content. I like my food pretty salty, and for these sausages, I might bump the salt ratio up just the littlest bit. But either way, these were absolutely fantastic sausages, unlike any sausage I've ever tasted before. And I hope the camera did it justice in showing just how juicy they were. From having more or less adapted this chili recipe into a sausage recipe from the seat of my pants, I'm really happy with how it turned out. And if you're into sausage making and you want to try making this yourself at home, check out the video description below and I'll put my exact recipe down there. And be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future sausage making and food experiment videos. And consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Great Lakes Country. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.